All right, flipping fans, finally back with a flipping related video. I'm here, I'm on my highest level character that I've got. This character is only level 64, and yet look at what I've got in my inventory here. Now, does this raw currency look like the inventory of a level 64 character who hasn't even made it to the endgame yet? I'm gonna take a guess and say probably not. This is literally the only character I've even played in Cruel difficulty. And let's see where I'm at in Cruel. I'm maybe about halfway through Act 3. Do you see a portal to the past here? I don't. And yet if we open my inventory, boom, what do we got here? All right, let's count it out real quick. We've got 100 exalted orbs plus 11 and change. That is pretty much exactly a divine orb right now in the current market. We've got 222 orb of alchemies. If you can believe it, that could be sold for around a divine orb. 248 chaos orbs in total. These are 44 to a divine right now. That is over 5.5 divines just in the chaos orbs. So that's like 7.5 divines sitting there just in raw currency. So how does a person that literally couldn't even tell you how the end game even works, I haven't even gotten there yet, how do you make 7.5 raw divines of just pure currency? Well, of course, as anyone who actually follows my channel regularly knows, obviously I made it on the currency exchange. And a lot of folks have even been asking me if I've been doing any flipping and my thoughts on it. So I'm ready to give you a first impressions. For the first couple weeks of the game, I didn't even touch the currency exchange. In total, I've probably only been messing with the currency exchange around 4 days, maybe 4 or 5 days, and ended up, I'm assuming, doing pretty well. I haven't been watching other people's YouTube videos, but I'm guessing starting the end game with probably around 10 divines of raw currency is going to end up being pretty good. All right, so let's get into it and talk about my first impressions of the PoE 2 currency exchange. Seeing as how it just came out, all I can do is give you my first impressions, and I'll walk you quickly through my thought process from when I first started playing the game till now, and we'll come back later with more videos later. So for those of you who have maybe never seen a video like this before, how do you even make money off of the currency exchange? Well, you're going to basically pick 2 items that you're going to buy and sell over and over again. So let's start with exalted orbs, and let's look at divine orbs since that's probably one of the most common exchanges in the game right now. So as we see, if you have a divine orb, you can get about 114 exalted orbs, and this number is literally moving around while I'm just recording this in the video because there's so many people buying and selling these that the price is just constantly changing, but it's also going to stay right around the same number most likely. So let's call it 114. Now, if we flip this trade around and we have exalted orbs and we want a divine orb, then we're going to have to pay 115 exalted orbs. So look at that. Are you ready to get rich, folks? All you have to do is sit here buying and selling exalted orbs and divine orbs. Just keep doing this over and over again. And every single time you do this trade, you're going to profit 1 exalted orb. You're going to be rich. But there is, of course, one problem. All right, so let's just use this trade as our first example of the video. It's nice and simple. Right now, it's at about 113 exalted orbs and 112 exalted orbs. So what you do is you would pay 112 exalted orbs for a divine, but there's a gold cost here, and the gold cost is 800 gold. Then when you turn around and flip the item, you're going to sell it for 113 exalted orbs, and unfortunately, then you have to pay 13,560. So that's 13,500 and 800 total that you pay, and you profit 1 exalted orb. So basically, if you had like millions of gold sitting around, you could sit and do this flip a few times, and you would make like a handful of exalted orbs. And we can quantify how much we make versus the gold that we spend. And in this case, it's pretty much exactly around 14,000 gold per exalted orb. So that is an absolutely horrible flip, and we don't want to do that. And if every transaction was like this, then flipping would be terrible. And since this is a first impressions video, let me just go ahead and tell you what my first impressions were. I started looking around about a week ago, and at that time, I just started going through a whole bunch of these different listings, and I just started looking for items that had a little bit of a spread between the buy and sell price that actually made sense, and you could make some decent money. Of course, in PoE 1, I made videos on this, and I made an absolute ton of money doing it, and it was really easy. And I'm gonna go ahead and tell you right now what my first impression of flipping in PoE 2 is. My first impression is that it's genuinely harder than in PoE 1, or at least it has been for me so far. Like if we look at these items, this isn't a great example because it's too cheap of an item. Let's look at Lesser Jeweler's Orbs. There's a little bit of a spread, but it's such a cheap item, you're not really gonna make any money. And it costs 200 gold for all the Lesser Jeweler's Orbs. Let's look at Greater Jeweler's Orbs. Now we've got 36 exalts to 1 and 35.5 exalts to 1. The spread is basically non-existent. Let's look at Perfect Jeweler's Orbs. Look at that, 283 exalts versus 298 exalts. The spread is so thin, and you're going to get destroyed by the gold costs. Even something like alchemies, I've got those in my inventory. On one side is 2.4 alks, and on the other side is 2.2 alks. Absolutely terrible versus the gold cost. And so I just went through so many of these items. And in PoE 1, after I went through enough items, I would pretty much always find something. In fact, I made a video where I showed how I went about my process of finding items, and I showed it live in the video, and I found an absolutely amazing flip just in that video, and I made like 100 divines off of just that and a couple other flips, and I showed everything on camera from start to finish. I'll try to link that video series at the end of this video in the last 20 seconds, the flipping playlist, just in case anyone hasn't seen it. And so in PoE 1, it really felt stupidly easy. But in PoE 2, I'm just going around checking all these items, okay? 4.75 vols, 4.79 vols. Where's the spread? And so for a second, I honestly thought to myself, oh my God, am I gonna have to stop making videos about flipping because this just can't do it anymore? Of course, if you go back and watch my videos where I talk about flipping, one of the things I talk about is how you have to go to slightly lesser traded items so you can find items that have the right amount of spread and the right amount of trade volume to actually make good money. So I went down the list. I started looking at some essences. With essence of the body, we got 2.83 to 1 and 3.5 to 1. It's just not great. And so I went through a whole bunch of items. Obviously, I haven't gone through all of them. Let's try a soul core. How about the first soul core of Topo Tanti? 4.83 exalts to 1 and 4.76 exalts to 1. Where are all the spreads, everybody? In PoE 1, I swear, if I did this, I would have already found something by now. And so my first impression, long story short, is that it feels genuinely more difficult. It feels like there aren't really spreads on items. And it feels like you may have to work harder and search more, and of course, have a good understanding of the game. So in a nutshell, that's my first impression of making money flipping on the currency exchange in Path of Exile 2. But if it's so hard and impossible and no items have any spread, then how the heck have I already made like 7.5 divines, even though I haven't even hit Endgame yet? Well, let's talk through that now. So let's go back to our Orb of Alchemy, since I've actually been buying Orb of Alchemies. One thing I noticed very early on, I was wondering in my head, like, what's gonna be the various exchange currencies in this game? Like, is it gonna be Chaos Orbs and Divine Orbs again? And I didn't even use the trade site until yesterday. So even though the game's been out for like a month, I still didn't even really know which one of these are going to be used as the main trading currencies. But one thing you'll notice, if you have something in here that you already want or already have, and you go to the other side and click it, I'm pretty sure that the thing that appears here at the top, which as you can see on the top, it's labeled popular. You see on the top left is exalted orbs, and to the right of that is chaos orbs. I'm pretty sure this means that pretty much any item you pick, it's going to show you what the main things that are being swapped back and forth with that item are. And so assuming that this is correct, that means that basically exalted orbs are the main trade currency in PoE 2, whereas it was Chaos Orbs back in PoE 1. Kind of weird, by the way. Who got to decide that? I'm curious. But then I just started wondering to myself, like, well, are there still people that are going to be trading in Chaos Orbs? And so let's look again at Orb of Alchemies. We've got 2.16 Orb of Alchemy to an Exalted, and 2.4. Basically no spread. It's a terrible trade because Orb of Alchemies are kind of expensive to trade. But what about Chaos Orbs? Are people buying and selling there? And there we've got 5 to 1. And 6 to 1. So the difference between 5 and 6 is actually like a 20% difference, whereas it was like a 10% difference in the Exalted Orb case. And if we look here to see how many people are buying and selling it, there's actually a lot of action going on, even for Chaos Orbs, which I don't think people assume are really being used for transactions. And when I finally started using the trade site, I did notice, yeah, so Exalted Orbs seem to be the main trade currency now, and Divine Orbs like in the past. Okay, so let's go look at the flip we just talked about a second ago. Instead of Exalted Orb and Divine Orb flipping, what about Chaos Orb and Divine Orb flipping? So if we look, there's tons of listed orders, which means there's probably a lot of action going on. Okay, it's still about the same. It's 44 to 45. So you would profit 1 Chaos Orb. Let's do a quick calculation. So you'd basically do 44 and 45. One transaction would have a Divine Orb on one side. You'd pay 800 gold. And on the other side, you'd get 45 Chaos. And now you're only paying 7,000 gold. So now you've profited 1 Chaos Orb for exactly 8,000 gold. Last time we checked, wasn't it like 20,000 gold for 1 Exalted? Chaos Orbs are like 2 to 1 Exalt or even 3 to 1 Exalt. So you're profiting like 3 times as much and you're only paying like a third of the gold. So suddenly we've already multiplied our profit by like times 10 or something per gold that we're spending. And so then I started wondering, well, what if I start going through a few of these items and I start looking to see if they're being bought and sold in Chaos Orbs, and maybe the volume isn't quite as high and there'll be a little bit more of a spread and I can actually make some money using Chaos Orbs instead of Exalted Orbs. And well, that's exactly what I did. And like 75% to 90% of all the cash I've made has been on flipping things with Chaos Orbs instead of Exalted Orbs. Although as I was searching through a bunch of stuff, I did randomly find one item that actually had a really good, really insane margin on Exalted Orbs. And so there was only one flip I did where I used Exalted Orbs. All right, so now that to end the video, I'm just gonna go ahead and talk about a couple trades that I did, how much profit I'm making per amount of gold spend, how many Chaos Orbs or Exalted Orbs am I making per gold that I've spent on a couple of my better flips that I've done so far, so you can get kind of a gauge and idea if you're doing flipping yourself, what's kind of a decent expectation for how much money you can make per gold. We're going to call these flip A, flip B, and flip S. Okay, so starting with flip A, this was the first flip I ever did. It was purely done in Exalted Orbs. So I found an item that had a good spread on it, buying the item for Exalted Orbs, selling the item for Exalted Orbs. I was actually pretty surprised. I didn't think I was going to find an item like this, and I just randomly stumbled upon it when I was buying the item myself. I did quite a few of these flips, and I noted the flip down on my computer, so I know exactly the gold cost per exalted orb that I gained off of it, and the typical cost in gold per exalted orb was right around 400 gold per exalted orb. I guess let's call it a B tier flip. So let's call 400 gold per exalted. Let's call that B tier, I guess, for now. I did the flip for maybe about a day, maybe 2 days. And on one of the days, suddenly, randomly, for like an hour, everything just suddenly insta-filled. And then suddenly the spread got absolutely massive and huge. And what was once a 400 gold per exalted orb trade suddenly became a insanely way more profitable 250 gold per exalted orb of profit from the flip, because the spread had just gotten so huge. I probably made about 200 exalteds just off of that in the course of about an hour, dumping like 50k gold all in all at once. If you go back and look at flip A now, I guess I could tell you the item, but of course I'm not going to, because I may come back to it later. If you look at the item now, the flip just doesn't exist anymore, so I've completely stopped doing it, and I might just check in on it every once in a while now. Okay, flip B is next. This was a decent, moderate, okay flip also, I thought. I was able to do it sometimes. This is another one where the spread sometimes opens and closes, and sometimes I just can't do it at all. Today, right before filming this video, I just completely stopped doing it because there was just no spread anymore. So 2 out of the 3 flips that I've done so far that I know of no longer exist as of the time of recording this video. Okay, so now this is where we enter into doing flips in chaos. So the other 2 flips were done in chaos only. So I bought the item in chaos, I sold the item in chaos. And here on flip B, it was 1.1 thousand gold per chaos orb. And if we do the math right now, exalteds are like 2.7 to 1 per chaos orb. So it actually just randomly happens to turn out to exactly 400 gold per exalted orb again. So flip B, B tier again, but this is crazy where you can find these items where it might not seem so profitable because the gold cost goes up so high. Now we're doing 1.1k per orb that we're making, but because chaos are so good versus exalted orbs at the moment, they're pretty valuable. It still ends up being just as good as the first flip, even though literally as I was doing it, I assumed it must be worse. And then when I sat down to do the math, I found out, wow, it was actually exactly the same, even though it didn't feel like I was doing very well on it. I've probably made easily 50 to 100 chaos orbs off of this one. And my last flip, flip S. Okay, flip S has been absolutely amazing, fantastic. All my gold has been going into it for the most part. Like I said before, I've made probably 75 to 90% of all my profit off of flip S. Flip S is also done purely in chaos orbs. So I buy the item in chaos, I sell the item in chaos, and I make 1 chaos orb for every 400 gold that I spend doing this flip. I am honestly going to assume that this is probably an S tier profit just because of how thin all the gold margins are and the actual cost of transacting in chaos orbs. I have a kind of a feeling that you may not be able to do a whole lot better than this, at least until we start flipping in divine orbs. So this was 400 gold per chaos that was made. And if we do 2.7 to 1 right now, that's pretty much exactly 150 gold per exalted. If we look at these 3 flips, I feel like this gives us a pretty good first impression, first view of the current state of flipping. I honestly, personally think it's kind of challenging, and we're going to see how this plays out. Whether a lot of people are going to be able to make money or not, what people are going to think of it, and whether other people are going to also find it as challenging, or if maybe it's going to get easier in the future, who knows. So I guess for now, let's say 150 gold per exalted orb is S tier, and then we'll say maybe 250 gold per exalted is A tier, and we'll say maybe 400 gold per exalted is B tier, I guess. Do let me know in the comments what you think about those. How much gold have you been spending for how much profit on the exchange so far? Let me know in the comments. Obviously, you don't have to say what items you're flipping. Anyone who actually does this and profits regularly from this knows that as soon as you share your item, you don't profit off the item anymore if like 2 other people come in and start flipping the item. So big surprise, I'm not going to tell you what items I flipped. But I've told you basically every other single thing I can other than the specific items I flip. And the final point I'll make is just that even though it does seem like exalted orbs have pretty much instantaneously become the de facto trading currency, these flips I've done, 2 of which were solely in chaos orbs, pretty much go to show you that people are transacting a pretty good amount in chaos orbs, even though it might not seem like that on the trade website. All right, so that's pretty much the end of the video, y'all. One final note I want to make is just a theory of why it might be kind of harder in PoE 2 than it was in PoE 1 where it was easy. Honestly, is if we just scroll down the list of items that's on the currency exchange, it's not really like a huge list of items. You know, in PoE 1, we had like divination cards, which basically was even more than this whole currency exchange in and of itself of just divination cards alone. It kind of reminds me of like the pigeonhole principle in mathematics, where, you know, if you have a whole bunch of pigeons and you only have some number of holes that the pigeons can go into, you can basically know exactly how many collisions between pigeons there are. And in this case, when the pigeons are colliding, trying to flip different items here, as soon as a bunch of flippers all collide with each other in the same hole, then you can't actually make any money off of it. So I might actually throw that out as a current theory as to why maybe it's going to be a little bit more difficult, not so easy. And you might have to kind of look a little harder, search a little harder. And I have given you what I think is a pretty decent tip, which is to maybe investigate doing some things, not just in exalted orbs, but also maybe look, for example, in chaos orbs, even though you might not expect that there would be a lot of trade volume. All right, y'all, with that is the end of the video. That's a wrap. For those of you who are new to all this flipping and new to the channel, and think this is interesting and interested in this stuff, I would encourage you to check out my other flipping videos if you want to learn more of the ins and outs. Probably every few weeks I'll do a flipping video, or maybe once a month or something like that. And so with that, good luck on your currency exchange flipping, y'all. Let me know how you're doing on it, and let me know what you think as far as A tier, B tier, S tier for how much gold you think it's going to cost to make different amounts of currency in PoE 2. I'd be very curious. All right, take care, y'all.